why don't some men preach the word? Why are there so many churches? And unfortunately, I'm not saying that as a caricature. There are a lot of churches that even right now, if you were to just drive, if you lived 30 minutes from where we are, you could pass hundreds of churches, but you go to this church or you go to that church. I heard Paul Washer say once, don't go to the church closest to your house. Go to the church closest to the Bible. Why don't churches and these preachers today preach the word?
A brilliant question. I just made a list, actually, for another place, 10 reasons why they don't preach the Bible. And I don't know that I can pull out of the back of my head all 10 of those. But it really begins with they were never trained to do it. They were trained in how to put on a summer camp. They were trained in how to do hospital visitation. They were trained in how to carry out administrative tasks and balance a budget and those kind of things. They were just never trained. So we are asking them, expecting them to do something that they have never really received adequate training to do it. So they just keep repeating the past. I think that's number one. Number two, I think churches, when they put together a pulpit committee to search for the next pastor, I think by and large, it's amateur hour. I don't think they really know how to look for a preacher. And so I think a lot of it falls back on the leadership of a local church. They're looking for a pastor who's engaging, who has a pretty wife, who has kids that will sit still, who is someone who has good bedside manners, who can go into hospital rooms and be very calming and pastoral. I mean, I can just keep this list going, but they don't want an expositor, a preacher of the Word of God, or they'd go hire one. It falls on the pulpit committees, and it's something they probably do once in a lifetime, maybe twice in a lifetime. And so they're just looking for the wrong kind of person to begin with. So that's another reason the churches hire somebody who can't even do it. I mean, it would be like for you to go get a haircut and you go to an accountant. I mean, you're going to the wrong person to get done what needs to happen. Another reason is they're trying to work their way up a denominational ladder. Or even an unofficial pecking order. Yeah. And so the guy at the top, what's he doing? Because one day, I'd like to be there. And so how do I get there? Well, I need to do what he's doing, and I'll get to second base and third base and finally home. And so there's this pipeline that's set up in churches or in the minds of ministers. They have the wrong role models. They have the wrong heroes. They're not trying to be like Martin Lloyd-Jones. They're not trying to be like Jonathan Edwards or someone alive today, John MacArthur or R.C. Sproul. They're trying to be like some spiritual lightweight. And so they're imitating the wrong person. I think on top of that, the congregation. They just want to come to church and feel good and have a short little sermon. And so what's more important to them is after church in the lobby, being able to shake the preacher's hand rather than sitting in church and receiving his message. And so the congregation contributes to it, and they put pressure on pastors to conform to their desires. And they place time demands on them. And such that they expect the pastor to be at their bedside every time they're in the hospital, like they're a Catholic priest. Nobody can die without the pastor there in the room, or the guy's going to go to purgatory. Yeah. that they expect the pastor to come to the house, eat meals with them, etc. And you just begin to add up all these expectations. I need 10 sessions in counseling. It just all adds up. He doesn't have time to study. He doesn't have time to dig into the Word of God because you've suffocated him with all these other expectations. I would add to that there are people in the church who make it known to the preacher that they don't like, his preaching. And so he's trying to be a crowd pleaser. And he's trying to establish or hang on to any popularity that he would have. And so it ends up being the lowest common denominator. Those are just some of the reasons, Costi. And I would add to that, maybe he's just never been called to the ministry to begin with. I actually contend we need fewer preachers, not more preachers. That we have too many churches, so therefore we have too many pulpits. We have more pulpits than we have God-chosen, God-called men. And there have been so many splits of churches, and with every split, you've just created more pulpits. And so therefore, in some of the churches, quite frankly, it's amateur hour who gets put up to preach. Someone who's never been trained, never been taught. Would you let someone do brain surgery on you who's never been to medical school?
No way.
It's not going to happen. And I understand Spurgeon never went to a Bible college or seminary, and Martin Lloyd-Jones never did either. Well, Spurgeon had probably the largest private theological library in all of England, and he was a genius. And so so you can be a genius and be self-taught if you can operate at that level. And the same with Lloyd-Jones. Until then, you need adequate training. And so therefore, it actually goes back to the seminaries, is another reason. The seminaries have not really provided the adequate training that such men need to make the primary ministry the preaching of the Word of God. You have so diffused and compromised and really divided up the pie with so many responsibilities that you've never provided him the adequate training. So I would go back to the seminaries and I would lay it at their feet as the point of origin on this. And I came up with, some other reasons. I think we've bought into this lie that people don't have a long attention span anymore. And so therefore you need to bring a 22-minute sermon because people can't hang with you. Well, how strange that is, because the night before they went to a concert that was a 2-hour
They hung just fine.
concert, and we were just fine. In fact, they showed up early for the warm-up act, which was 45 minutes before that. But they showed up before that for the tailgate thing out in the parking lot, and then they signed up for the meet and greet, afterwards.
It's a 6-hour night.
Yeah, or they went to the football game, and the fact that it went into overtime, they were elated. They're not about to leave. And they showed up early to watch the band march into the stadium and the tailgate party, and 4 hours because all the commercials now. They're sitting there in the stadium, so they just invested 6 hours in this thing. They come to church and they go, "Oh, you're hurting my head," and they don't have time. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it for 1 second. You have time for what you want, and so the fact is, you just don't want any more. And so the pastors cave into this.
Yeah. Okay,
then I'll just give you a little 22-minute pat on the head. And instead of taking them from where they are to where they need to be. That's your mission.
And that'll both draw and repel, right? You would have
absolutely.
The true church then would rise up.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there'll be people who don't like that. Okay, it's addition by subtraction. Then you can just go down the street, and they've got a bowling alley down there, and they'll just cater to you, and you might even end up in a cult.
That's so helpful.